Okay, you people, so you're going to offer a mantle. This is very nice, but what it is, just think what we're doing is, Jennifer's going to, on behalf of Mahamudra Center, Jennifer's going to offer kind of the universe, really, the contents of the universe, to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, okay? So we just imagine that. Use your creative imagination and think of all the marvelous things of the world, and we offer them as a request. It's got very auspicious meaning. It's lovely. If you know the little prayer, you can say it to you. So these are the words, but just imagine, just use your creative imagination, offering all the marvelous things of the world as a request to the Buddha for the teachings. Okay. You're a very good umze. So now I'll just lead a little prayer, and it's stating two things. The first part is just for those of us who already figure we are Buddhist. It's reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And then the second two lines are stating, the Lamas would say stating our motivation. We might say stating our purpose, why are we here together, To listen, it's to listen to these teachings so we can become a Buddha, so we can help others. So we're thinking we're going to take refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and we're going to listen to these teachings so that we can become a Buddha eventually, no matter how long it takes, so we can be a benefit to others. That's the prayer. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay. Well, if many Buddhists, many people all over the world don't like karma, Buddhists included. I know some Buddhists who are like social worker Buddhists, wonderful people. They don't even talk about karma, almost like people are embarrassed to think that you believe you could have been a rat in a past life. People like joke about it, So it's sort of seen in a really cliched kind of hippie way. So serious people don't like to talk about it. But actually, if we look at the big picture of Buddha's view of the universe, it's this this entire worldview. It's a coherent worldview, actually. And what's studied in the great monastic university system of Tibet, which tracks itself directly back to the great Nalanda tradition. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama always tells us, we are the Nalanda tradition. I mean, Buddhism was flourishing in the Nalanda monastic university, this amazing place in India near Rajgir, where Buddha taught the Heart Sutra and many of his sutras. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, and began to just sort of dissolve after that. But by the 7th and 8th century, it was already strongly taking place in Tibet. So there's been an unbroken time since then, this incredible Nalanda tradition. His Holiness will always tell us that. So they, where you study, and so the Tibetan monastic university system, where you study this entire worldview. And the thing is, if karma, the law of karma were not relevant to Buddhism, if it were not something valid, the whole of Buddhism would collapse into a heap of complete absurdity. The whole of Buddhism is contingent upon, and the understanding of Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism, it's rooted in the view of karma. So it's crucial to understand, But because it's so fundamentally different from the philosophical materialist view, which of course is the view that prevails in our culture, and the one we think is serious, the serious scientists, they're the serious people, then we sort of feel sometimes embarrassed to talk about it. But let's look at it. So the Buddha's view is fundamentally different from other religious traditions. But often when we hear about karma, it sounds exactly the same. Don't do this and don't do that. And if you do this, something bad will happen. We don't ever think about the good things because it's exactly the same with good. But we hear it, and this is a really crucial point to understand. And this takes us a long time to begin to internalize, especially us who have this philosophical materialist view. And also coming from the Christian teachings, most of us, let's say, Christian or the Muslim teachings or the Jewish teachings. Those views, they're the world religions, the ones that are major, they all posit the concept of a creator. So the almost default assumption in most people's minds is that religion equals creator. That's why people always ask the question, is Buddhism a religion? Then they say, oh no, it's a philosophy. Well, what do you think religion is? It's a philosophy. It's just a religious philosophy, that's all. It's a view of the universe, a view of how things are. So the crucial point, and always be stressing it, continuously discussing it, continuously, you'll see in all your questions, is all on the basis of hearing it as a punitive kind of punishment, a system of punishment and reward, which is how we hear religion. And this is a crucial point. I always quote this. I have a Jesuit priest friend, and I asked him, please tell me, by definition, what is a sin? And he said, by definition, a sin, a negative action, is doing what God said not to do. Now that fits absolutely perfectly if you posit a being called a creator. And Buddhism doesn't. This is the massive difference. In so many ways there are similarities, between the Muslims and any Jewish, any religious philosophical view. There are so many similarities. But the absolutely fundamental difference is this view of karma that Buddha has, and therefore the view of the mind and of consciousness. Because Buddha doesn't discuss a thing called a soul. There's no third component, mind, body, spirit, which is what most people say. So Buddha's got some fundamentally different views, and if we want to understand Buddhism, we need to know these differences and understand them properly so we can start to apply them in our lives if we are trying to be Buddhists, So, okay. So then all of this, to make it really clear, these differences, we need to know what the mind is. Because this is the starting point for the Buddha, and this is the central point, and all the way to Buddhahood, all the way to enlightenment. To understand the mind is absolutely vital, because also the mind is what, quote unquote, creates karma, which we're going to unpack, So the mind first of all, for the Buddha's view, very clear. It is not physical. It is not the brain, and nor is it even a function of the brain. Now this is interesting. These days, more and more discussions, about this topic. I remember when I was editing a book of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's on the process of how to help at the time of death. I think we probably discussed it, Jennifer. I think we did, didn't we? I'm not sure. So in that book, at the same time I was editing that book, I remember reading a book by an American medical journalist called Nick Teresi or something. And it was a book, he's a medical journalist, and he's done all this research, mainly in the United States, about the problems and obstacles and difficulties now within the industry of cutting out organs and donating organs. There are real problems now, because what's happening is, over the centuries, there's always been talk in all different cultures. There's always kind of experiences, examples of people who have died, clinically dead, and then they quote unquote come back to life. Now, of course, from the materialist scientific view, there's no explanation for that. So we just put it in the too hard basket. We don't understand what happens because it does not fit with the view, because the view, as we know, in the modern materialist view, is the mind is the brain. When brain stops, when the heart stops, the person is dead. So what happens, of course, is, they then keep the person wired. They keep the person's heart breathing, lungs breathing, the heart beating. They look all warm and toasty. They look like a living being. So from their point of view, the person's dead. But from the Buddhist point of view, especially if we take the Vajrayana model, which is the view in Tibet, where the detailed descriptions of the death process and of what occurs, and which talks about we've got gross consciousness, which is inextricably linked to this gross body. Well, that's all we posit as existing in the West. So when you stop breathing, that's the ceasing of what the Buddhist view would call the gross consciousness, and indeed the gross physical body, and they're intimately linked, you know. But then we're not dead yet. We've now got subtle mind, and that does not depend upon, there's no evidence of a brain working when the subtle mind is there. And there's, of course, there's very different descriptions of what goes on here, but there's gradually this process of ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, until you get to what they call the very subtle consciousness, and then eventually that consciousness leaves the body. But it could be up to 3 days after the person stops breathing. So there's this big problems now, because people, you know, in this book he was talking about, many people now are seeing the experience of a person's dead, they want to cut his liver out, and the man comes back to life. I mean, how inconvenient. And they can't explain it. There are so many stories like this, so many stories. Lama Zopa quotes the story of one guy in India who continually would look like he was dying, and they'd be on the funeral pyre, and he'd pop up and start to talk, you know. So it's like so this can't be explained in materialist culture. And this is interfering with the problems of cutting out organs. So there's lots of different discussions. The other thing was he had a whole chapter on what the world calls out-of-body experiences. You know, people who on the operating table, who are completely can't be conscious as far as the materialist view is concerned, who report vivid experiences of knowing exactly what is going on. You know, they have the feeling of floating above their body. Then, from the Buddhist perspective, that's their subtle mind, which is the same part of our mind that dreams. And you might have an experience of being above your body, but you haven't left your body. But your subtle mind is totally conscious. And he even quoted one woman who had to have such a radical procedure that they had to practically make her dead. From their point of view, there was no way she could be conscious, not a possibility, but she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience, explaining exactly what they talked about, the music they played, the jokes they said, so no one can argue with this. So there's a very interesting book, you know, very interesting. So anyway, one doctor was quoted in this book and said, "I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain." He said, "I don't know what it is, but this I can say." So I think this is brilliant. People are being forced now, the modern views are being forced to question their assumptions. And of course, all these amazing conversations with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and all the best brains in the Tibetan tradition, dealing with the best brains in the modern world, having these very excellent discussions. And it's only really now also, I would say, after 50 years of Buddhism being in the modern world, that now so much of the ancient Indian literature is being published, and people in the West are starting to have this respect for this incredible system that, as His Holiness said, it was these Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Buddha was educated in this incredible system. I mean, in our culture, in the modern European culture, what do we know about India? Absolutely nothing. We track our knowledge back to the Greeks. We think the Greeks are the best, you know. But now people are starting to realize so much has being published in these amazing conferences that His Holiness is involved in. So it's fantastic that people are questioning. The materialist views are questioning their assumptions, you know. So anyway, the Buddhist view, very clear, super clear. All the evidence is there, all the literature is there, all the findings of all the great yogis are there, you know. That consciousness or mind, first of all, these words are used synonymously. Second, necessarily, mind or consciousness is necessarily not physical, not the brain, and nor is it even a function of the brain. It doesn't mean the brain doesn't play a role. It's very evident. And without insulting neuroscientists, I would say that the brain is a physical indicator of what is going on in the mind, in the consciousness. So, mind is not physical. Second, it's got far subtler levels of cognition. This is something absolutely fundamentally necessary to understand if you want to understand Buddhism and Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy and the view of karma. There are these subtler levels of mind. And this is what I said before, are indicated by this whole the people when they stop breathing. They're not dead yet. You know, there's still the subtle mind. So the mind has got these much subtler levels of cognition. And this was discovered more than 3,000 years ago by these genius Indians. They're the ones who cultivated this incredible, sophisticated psychological skill called, the world calls it, what's called single-pointed concentration, samadhi. So samadhi is concentration, but the technique is known, as we know in Sanskrit, as shamatha, which is this where you it takes several years to get it, even if you're pretty intensive and a pretty good practitioner, and you learn to go beyond the conceptual level, beyond the sensory, and you access these more subtle, refined, very much more powerful, capable levels of mind. Of course, we don't even posit such levels of mind as existing in modern neuroscience and psychology. This is fundamental, and this has been around for 3,000 years, This awareness, these skills. So Buddha, he eventually diverged in his own direction, in particular in relation to his own personal, direct, experiential findings about the nature of self. That's where he diverged, So Buddhism, he didn't throw out all the previous things he'd learned. He incorporated those because he had found those to be true, about karma, for example. But he diverged in his own direction in relation to particularly the ultimate nature of things, emptiness, and therefore the nature of self. So the fundamental point about the mind then, 1, it is not physical. 2, it's got these much subtler levels of capacity for cognition. 3, it's the potential of mind. I mean, there's nothing equivalent in modern psychology. There's just nothing. It sounds like science fiction to neuroscientists and science and psychologists. The level to which we can develop our mind, and actually, it's indicated very clearly by the word Buddha. The Sanskrit Buddha, the Tibetan equivalent Sangye. The first syllable, the etymology is very tasty. The first syllable implies the utter eradication from one's mind of all ego, all fears, all neurosis, all delusion, all attachment, jealousy, anger, low self-esteem, depression, the stuff that we are intimately familiar with. The Buddha has found, this is exactly the point from his own direct experience, that this stuff, and this is crucial in the whole Buddhist view, that this stuff is not integral to who we are. It is not fundamental in our nature. It is not at the core of our being. So you could say one of the key jobs of being a Buddhist is to remove from the mind these neuroses. This is the job of being a Buddhist. But not only can we do that, that's implied by the first syllable, sang. The second syllable, gye, or da in Sanskrit, is that we can develop to perfection all the other parts of our mind: love, wisdom, compassion, generosity, all the virtues. Buddha has found that these are at the core of our being. These are who we actually are in our being. So this is the entire. So if this is the result, Buddha getting rid of all the rubbish out of your mind, ceasing it forever, and perfecting all the goodness, if that's the result, then it's obvious the methodology. The key job of being a Buddhist, the key job, is not to watch your breath, is not to just wear robes looking like a 14th century person, is not to say mantras. The key job is not to even, like Buddha. It's not to do prostrations, none of that. That's not the key job. The key job, the heart job, the actual job of being a Buddhist is to identify your delusions and lessen them and eventually get rid of them, and identify the virtues and eventually perfect them. That's the job. Everything else you do in Buddhism, wear robes, take vows, do your mantras, do your prostrations, they support that job. All your devotion in the Buddhas, all those practices support the actual job of being a Buddhist, which is to work on your mind. A simple way of putting it. That's it. So clear. Not complicated. Not complicated as a concept, but it's the hardest job we'll ever do because we are addicted to nonsense, Okay, so our mind is not physical. It has much more subtle levels of cognition. It's got this incredible natural potential. As we know in the Mahayana view, they say everybody possesses Buddha nature. What it means is every mind, by definition, possesses the potential to be free of delusions and full of all the wisdom and virtue. That's it. That's the view. That's the essence of it, So Buddhist practice is the job of doing that. So, okay, now the other thing about the mind, this is shocking, that's radically different from the materialist view. is that next point before that, that it's a word that mind and consciousness, they're synonymous, but they refer to your thoughts, your intellect, all your clever intellectual thoughts, all your brilliant scientific thoughts, all your brilliant theoretical musical thoughts, all your thoughts about how to make cakes, all the intellectual part of us, all the clever thoughts. Mind refers to that. Mind refers to all the feelings and emotions and love and compassion and rage and psychosis and depression and anxiety and paranoia. All these words we have in the West for how we feel, our emotions. Mind refers to those as well. Or the negative, the positive, Mother Teresa's mind, Hitler's mind, that's your mind, consciousness. But also, too, there are these subtler levels, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being. This is our mind. It's a much more subjective kind of use of the word, and it's super personal, because this gets to the next point, and this is really quite shocking for the materialist view, and also for the Christian view and the other religious views. Mind does not come from anyone else. This is the nuttiest idea of Buddha. Nobody gives you a mind. So, but look at the whole materialist view. It's based upon this, isn't it? Your mind. We think the mind is the brain, and then where'd you get your brain from? You do get it from mummy and daddy. Of course you do. But that's just not your mind, that's all. This is so shocking, we can't hear it properly. So if we are, and this is not insulting neuroscience, all these amazing discussions that His Holiness has with neuroscientists, bringing these views together, it's marvelous. But the so clear for the Buddha's view, your brain isn't the mind. You get a brain from your mother, you get the genes, the DNA, all these things. But you don't get your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your love, your compassion, your kindness. That's mind. Equally, you do not get anything from a creator. There is no such concept in Buddhism. He's not being rude, but Buddha's basically telling us we don't need creating. We do fine creating ourselves. And this is where the law of karma comes in. So therefore our mind didn't start in our mother's womb. This is the absolute truth as far as materialist philosophical views are concerned. You started in your mother's womb. And then where do you track yourself back to? Your mummy, your daddy, grandma, grandpa, great-grandpa, and go back to the monkeys. That's the way we present in the materialist view, isn't it? So you began in your mother's womb. And your source is your parents. That's why we kind of cut out the brain. When you hear about all these crazy murderers and terrorists and people, or multi-murderers, they cut out their brains. They're trying to find where the problem is. Well, the Buddha says you won't find it in their brain, baby. It's their mind. And this is where karma comes in. So the other one is, which is shocking, like I said, there's no concept of creator. Now, this is interesting. We know the term superior being, Superior being. Well, Buddha has that term, Arya being in Sanskrit, but it's plural. We can all become one of them. So, of course, in Christianity and Islam, that term, superior being, refers to a creator, refers to what they call God or Allah, whoever, who is the source of the universe. Yeah, the Buddhist view, the Christian view is that there's this being who didn't have a cause. I know I've heard about from the Christians that these extensive discussions in their philosophy showing that you can have such a thing as a first cause. But the Buddha would say that's completely incoherent. This is where Buddha diverged from the Hindu views, that even though they have the view of karma, they still all assert some cosmic, essential, core, source energy, Not like that for the Buddha. Absolutely not like that. So there's no such thing as a creator. But superior being, no problem. Buddhism uses it. Absolutely. You become a superior being from the moment you first realize emptiness. So there are trillions of superior beings. But the concept that we all track ourselves back to one being. No view like this. That's the Hindu view. That's the Muslim view. That's the Christian view. That's the Jewish view. The creator religions, Not like that in Buddhism. It's fundamentally different. So the Buddha's view is there are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of minds. The term in Tibetan is very tasty for the term we say in English, sentient being. It's literally, I don't speak Tibetan, but it's literally semchen, mind possessor. It's a really tasty term. I think it's much better than sentient being. It's very direct. And the Buddha would say there are trillions of sentient beings. Not just humans. There's only 7 billion of us. It's nothing. Probably in one summer evening at Mahamudra Center, you'd have 7 billion mozzies, wouldn't you? So it's clearly there's more mosquitoes. There's obviously far more other beings, even the ones we can see, all the bugs and all the animals. There's trillions of them. They are all also sentient beings. So the Buddha would say there are trillions of sentient beings. And so the source. So who is the source? Where do I begin? The big question we have is, where did I begin? Well, if you think of your mind, and there's a term in Buddhist psychology, mental continuum. Think of your mind like a river of mental moments. All your thoughts and feelings of today, if you track them back second by second, going before, you know that this moment of consciousness came from a previous moment of consciousness, like a link in a chain. This unbroken chain of mental moments you go tracking back. Yesterday, day before. If you had perfect memory, there'd be no space, would there? There'd be unbroken chain of mental moments. Each second coming from the previous moment of cognition. Each moment coming from the previous moment of cognition. So of course, inexorably, you'll get back to the first second in your mummy's womb, won't you? So then you've got to get back right to the first second of conception. So then the question is, what about the moment before conception? Well, we know the egg was in mummy's body. The sperm was in daddy's body. This we know. But where was your mind, baby? It was not in the egg and sperm, I promise. It didn't get put there by a creator. You track it very simply back to a previous moment of itself. And then not more than a few weeks before that, this continuity of our consciousness was in a previous body that had recently died and all sorts of things happened, and we found our way to our present mother's human womb. So then you think, well, where did I begin? Maybe a previous life before that. So you track your mind back in this unbroken chain of mental moments, and you get back to conception in the previous life, and then where did the mind come from? A previous moment in a previous life. So instinctively, we think if we keep going back, we'll find the beginning. We all want a first moment. We all want a first cause. We all want, His Holiness, it was so wonderful one time in all his discussions with scientists. He said there was all this discussion about Big Bang. He said, Big Bang, no problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. So this Buddhist idea is that everything that exists, not only the mind, but matter as well, the 4 elements, this is in the Vajrayana model, all the universe is made of the 4 elements. Well, these too are beginningless. And this is the craziest idea. Just emotionally, instinctively, it just sounds absurd. But there's no logic to think any other way. We just assume there has to be a first moment. We assume that something has to have an absolute first moment. Buddha says it's not viable, and much of the philosophical teachings in Buddhism would debate with this concept. It's not a possibility to have an uncaused phenomenon like that. So your mind is not physical. Your mind goes to much more subtle levels. Your mind has this unbelievable potential, just naturally. You don't inject it into you, Buddha nature. It's already there. Your mind has these much more subtle levels. Your mind does not come from mummy or daddy or a creator. It does not start in your mummy's womb. It keeps going back. Now, it's a crazy view. You think this is just absurd. How can you say that my mind is beginningless? But logically, it's the only conclusion. If you don't, yeah. And then, of course, the Mahayana view says your mind will continue after you die as well, and never ending. So this is what we're discussing here. This is a very, very different view. So, what determines, and what is it that determines the person I am? Why do I get angry? Why do I want to kill people? Why am I psychotic? Why am I good at music? Why am I compassionate? We're looking into the brain for these things, and we haven't found many of the answers yet. As we would say in the West, we haven't found the answers yet. 99% of these things we don't know the answer yet. That's how we talk. But the Buddha has got his answers. He's not being arrogant. He says, I've found what I've found to be true, and he presents it. But he's not asking us to believe him, because he's not a creator. And that's the massive difference. This friend of mine, when I asked the priest, by definition, what is a sin? Doing what God said not to do. And so, of course, then that's what defines something as negative. But there's no view like that in Buddhism. This is the point about karma now. There's no such view. Why? Because when you've done something bad, you'd be punished. We know the punishment reward model, Now this is very deep in our bones. We instinctively feel this. Don't blame your Jewish mother. Don't blame your Catholic mother for having the idea of guilt and blame and I'm bad. So when we have that view, which is coming from those philosophical views, then we hear Buddhism, we think, oh, it just sounds like the same. Buddha says, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, just like Jesus, must be the same. No, there's a fundamental difference. And it really does take us time in our modern culture. For us Westerners who've come from Christianity, let's say, or the philosophical scientific view, it takes us a time to really think this view through properly. That basically Jesus says don't kill. And you say to him, and you should ask, why not, Jesus? And he will say, because God said so. Now that even happens in your mother's household. You're a little girl and mummy says, don't do that. And you naturally, being a smarty pants, will say, why not? We know mummy's answer, because I said so. So we understand that view. And that's the punitive view of punishment and reward. It's like a threat, If you do this, you'll get punished. That's how we hear it. That's what we believe is meant by it. So when we hear karma, we think, oh, here we go again. No, it's fundamentally different. But it takes us a time to hear it. So Buddha says don't kill, just like Jesus. Why not, Buddha? Well, guess what? First thing, how does Buddha define a negative action? It's very simple. There are levels of negative actions and there are levels of positive actions, and we're going to be going into all this. So the heaviest negative action is one that you would do that would harm another. And so why that is negative for the Catholics, and this priest told me this, there is some aspect of natural law, meaning people don't like getting killed. He says that's true, but the real thing that makes it a sin is that God said not to do it. This is so powerful, and I'm not criticizing this view. If you live according to God's law, you'll live a happy life, baby. But this is not Buddha's view. For Buddha, it is only natural law. It's got nothing to do with the fact that he says don't do it. He's like a messenger. This is for me the good analogy. You go to your doctor and she will tell you all the dangers of smoking cigarettes. And she will show you these pictures or videos of lungs of people who've got, had lung cancer. And she will say, do not smoke, Robina. And you'll say, why not? Because, sweetheart, you're going to end up having those lungs. She will not say, because I say so. I say so. And if you smoke, Robina, I'm going to punish you with cancer. Nobody thinks like that. But that's how we think about morality. It's childish. It's infantile, the Buddha would say. It's absurd. It's bizarre, actually. It's a very weird idea. There's nothing wrong with doing what Mummy said. If Mummy says make your bed and you don't do it, you're a naughty girl, you do displease Mummy. That's okay like that. That's okay. But to have the whole view of the universe to be that's okay if you have faith in God. Most people who say they have faith in God, they second guess God the whole time. If you really had faith in God, you'd live a happy life. Nothing wrong. But that's not the Buddha's view. So the Buddha is like a doctor. So, and this is really the powerful point about karma. The Buddha says that it's a natural law. Nobody likes getting killed. Do your market research, please. Go and ask a few people. Do you like getting killed, lied to, punched in the nose, having your things stolen? Nobody does. You check the body language of an ant. It's the same. Nobody wants to be harmed. This is fundamental and it's natural law. No one makes it that way. So the Buddha says harming another is a negative action is one, the heavy ones, that harms another. Not because he says so, but this is the point now. At this first level of practice, there's different levels of practice, like junior school, high school, university, postgraduate. The way we say in the Lam Rim, lower scope, middle scope, great scope, and then, Tantra. I like to call it junior school, high school. It's we recognize. The very first level of practice, entry level practice in Buddhism, is this level, this to do with the law of karma. That basically Buddha's saying every millisecond of what any sentient being thinks or does or says, every millisecond, just naturally, because this is a natural law that runs the minds. Karma, the law of cause and effect, is a natural law that no one has made up, no one invented it, no one runs it, there's no copyright on it, there's no punisher, there's no rewarder, there's no boss, there's no creator. It is a natural law, like botany, like gravity. It's a natural law that every millisecond of what any being, monkeys and ants and dogs and all the others, thinks or does or says is a natural process of, and Buddha would have liked this term, of programming your consciousness, programming your mind. Or as they say in the text, of sowing seeds in your mind. Every millisecond of what you think and do and say just naturally is this process of sowing seeds. And seeds, by definition, will eventually ripen, and in this case, as our own future experiences. This is a natural law, Buddha says. This is a natural law. So, at the very first level of practice, which is the level where Buddha exhorts us, don't kill, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't steal, don't lie, etc., etc. Half a dozen things, That's his first instruction. As Lama Zopa says, the very first level of practice to start this second is to stop doing actions that harm others. So then you have to ask, why? And even though we are defining here a negative action as one that harms another, this very first level of practice in Buddhism, the reason Buddha exhorts us not to kill is not because it harms others, but guess what? It's because, honey child, he is saying, because it will harm you. This we miss completely in the Western understanding of karma. We think, oh, it sounds selfish. Then we haven't got the point if we think that. It's sort of like, that's the fundamental point. So the reason behind this very first level of practice, and we're going to go into it in depth, because we learn this at this first level of practice, is, that everything we think and do and say is this natural process of sowing seeds in the mind that will ripen in the future as my experiences. His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls karma self-creation. It's a really great way of putting it. This is the difference. So the Christian teaching, there's different ways of talking about it, but the traditional view, God says don't kill. If you kill, then you separate yourself from God. Your aim is to be oneness with God, but you separate yourself from God. So in that sense, at the simplest level of talking, you are punished. Or then if you become oneness with God, then you are rewarded. This view of punishment and reward. But in Buddhism, there's no punisher. There's no rewarder. There's no one who does it to you. It's sort of like saying if you think that you don't smoke because your doctor said, and then if you smoke, that she will punish you with cancer. We would laugh if we heard that. But that, as I said, that is our view of religion. That's our view. So we think Buddha's like that too. It's just not true. But it takes us a time to hear this, because that's why we get guilty. And that's why, this is what's so bizarre. We have a strong feeling that if no one sees you do something naughty, you check this. If no one sees you do something naughty, oh, I got away with it. We say it like that. That's like thinking, your doctor tells you not to smoke. Why not? Because you'll get cancer. So you'll go home, and this is like thinking, oh, my doctor's not here, so out come your Marlboros, and you smoke away, and you think, I won't get cancer because my doctor doesn't see me. We would be laughed at if we thought that. That's the view of karma. It's absurd to think that just because someone doesn't know that you stole something, that somehow it won't bring consequences. And this is the simple point the Buddha's making, that every millisecond of what we think and do and say is this process of programming us with those tendencies. It's natural. No one has to see you, no one has to know. Just the same with smoking. No one has to know you smoke or see you smoke for you to get cancer. It's something so fundamental. And when we can begin to take into our lives this view of karma and apply it really properly, it stops anger, it stops you becoming attached, it stops you being a victim, it stops you blaming, it stops your guilt. You begin to grow up and realize that you are the boss of yourself. You have to be the one. Do I want future suffering? Buddha says to you, no, Buddha. Well, honey child, stop creating it. That means stop killing, stop stealing, stop doing at least these heavy negative actions. Because apart from the people you're harming, the fact that, and this is where we get into more detail, and we're going to go into it, what defines a negative action here, the heaviest one is that it harms another. But this is the point now. But what makes you create negative karma, which is to say what causes you to sow a negative seed in your mind, which will ripen as your future suffering, isn't even to do the action, but it's what's in your mind that determines what you do and what causes it to be negative or positive. So again, in general, the basic principle of karma, this law of cause and effect, is that every millisecond of what I think and do and say. And our tragedy is we're totally unconscious. We're programmed. We come into this life programmed, totally instinctively, from countless lifetimes of habit. We just fall into the same habits. We don't ever question, and we'll go into all this. So we're just on autopilot, totally instinctive, just following our feelings. So every millisecond, it's a process of we're sowing seeds in our mind every millisecond. And seeds by their nature will ripen in the future, and in this case, as our experiences. So the next level of detail is this. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say that's labeled a negative action, the word karma is said to mean action. It could either be of the mind, the body, or the speech. So every millisecond of what we think and do and say that's labeled negative, and I'll go into this exactly and tell you what that means, will necessarily ripen in the future as one suffering. So that's where we have to understand the Four Noble Truths. Buddha talks about different levels of suffering. This is the stuff of Buddhist philosophy, This is the basic stuff of a Buddhist's practice. So the other level is every single action we do with our body, speech, and mind that we label positive, because there's really either negative, positive, or neutral. There's no fourth kind. There's variations of all of these. It's quite subtle. And this negative, positive, and neutral has a massive meaning in different ways in Buddhism. So every millisecond of what we think and do and say that's labeled positive or virtuous will necessarily sow seeds in the mind that will necessarily ripen in the future as one's happiness. This is the fundamental law of karma. Buddha did not make it up. He did not invent it. He does not have copyright on it. He is not a punisher. He doesn't run it. He's not a rewarder. Just like, and this is a really crucial point to get, like we say botany is a natural law. So we know that nobody actually created botany. Clever people have come along and looked at growing things, and then with their clever mind have identified the laws, and so then have articulated the laws. That's not the same as creating botany. They don't create botany, they simply observe it. That's Buddha. He's observed the natural law that plays out in the minds of all beings in the universe. That's the subtlety of what we're capable of. And that's what Buddha's brilliant findings are. He didn't make this up, and therefore you believe it. That's how we think of religion too. The Buddha's view is, Buddha was a regular person who observed every single thing that he has said to be true. This is something so important. We really take time to hear this, We're so used to believing that God is the source of the laws. He created the laws. He created reality. He created me and things and good and bad. We think this way. There's no similar view in Buddhism. So we've got to think it through intelligently, not just not have all our assumptions, Buddha is a person who observed the universe, but it happens to be at a more subtle level because he was able to access these more subtle levels of his cognition. remember actually years ago in Nelson, I always quote this, 20 years ago I think, I was in Nelson, and there was a guy in the audience who was a Buddhist, a scientist. It was the only time anybody has ever asked me this question. It's very fascinating. He said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? This is a brilliant question, because that's the assumption in Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, that God is the source. And then, as we know in the teachings of Jesus, God revealed things. I mean, of course, there's a certain level of understanding like that in Buddhism. The greatest yogis can can access the Buddha at a more subtle level. You could call that revelation if you like. But this idea, and that scientist's question was so brilliant, the assumption he had in his mind that Buddhism, this body of knowledge, has been revealed from on high. That's how we think of religion. It's not like that. So I said to him, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about relativity to him? And of course he and everybody else laughed. Of course we wouldn't. But that's the approach with Buddha. We have to get used to this. We're not used to it. We just think it as belief, religion, you can't prove it, you've got to believe in it. Oh, it's just so superstitious, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, to us modern people, if you, as you move along practicing Buddha's methodology, and the way I'd put it is, taking these teachings as your working hypothesis, what else can you do? You've got to start somewhere. If you move along, just like studying science, studying anything, you take that methodology and you start to learn it. And each step of the way, you prove certain things. Then you tick the box. Now I've proved that. Now you go to the next level. Oh, well, Buddha told me this. Now I prove this one. Einstein said this. I've proved that. And you keep going. This is natural. This is how we learn any body of knowledge. But as His Holiness said, if you move along practicing Buddha's methodology, but you get to the point where you actually, at a certain stage, you prove that he's wrong about that point, you prove it, then you must reject the Buddha. Of course you must. This is the level of rigor and analysis and logic and experiential knowledge that we must employ. Just to think, in the same way that if, like as a scientist, you just don't say, oh, I believe in relativity. What good is that? I believe in mathematics. I mean, hear the difference. You could believe in mathematics because enough people know it that you can manage, But if your mother says, go buy me 5 oranges at the market and there's no one around, you can never prove that you get 5 or not because you don't know math. It's really obvious, but we take all this for granted. So, but like everything, you've got to start somewhere. So when my teacher, when I first went to school and she taught me, the 10 times tables or whatever they called it, maybe the 12 times, I forget now. Yeah, because we used shillings and pences and we had to have all these funny numbers. Anyway, I had to start with a thought. I couldn't prove it was true yet. I had to take as a hypothesis that 1 + 1 is 2. Then she would say, go home, Robina, and prove it for yourself. That's all knowledge is like that. But that's exactly the same in Buddhist knowledge. You take it as your hypothesis. You can't say, oh, I can't prove karma yet. Well, how can you say that about science? You hear Einstein tell you about relativity. You don't even know that 1 + 1 is 2 yet. You've got to start with taking it as your working hypothesis, and then through your own experience, you experience the truth of it. This is how you practice Buddhism. Not just doing your mala and looking holy and wearing your nun's clothes and liking Buddhism. Liking Buddhism is not the same as knowing Buddhism, and we really confuse these two, So, Buddha's not a creator. Doesn't posit such a thing. We don't need, he says it's a mistake, he says. He's not trying to be rude. He's found to be, it's a misconception. It's a misconception. Our mind is beginningless. It's the product of the law of cause and effect. Everything we think and do and say produces, essentially, the person we become. So this is so amazing when you think about it. It's such a marvelous view if we hear it properly. But how we hear it is, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to try and catch you out, but you watch every question you're going to ask about karma. You're going to see this. I'm going to warn you in advance. Every question we all in the universe ask about karma is always only about why bad things happen. I've never yet had a person ask me why good things happen. So this proves we hear it in a very punitive way. We hear it in a very heavy way. It's all about punishment. You know, the commonest question is, you mean that little girl who was abused by her father? You mean she did something in the past to deserve it? We always talk like this. It's very, very fascinating, which simply shows we hear it in a punishment way, in reward, punitive, heavy, moralistic. It's not meant like that. So it really takes a lot of thinking and unpacking and unraveling these philosophical views to begin to be joyful to live according to the law of karma. I mean, I love the idea that I'm in charge of who I am. I thought the idea that someone else made me is really wicked. How dare a neurotic mother and father decide they have sex and create me, and then my therapist will tell me I've got to stop blaming them. I'm sorry, I disagree. Please hear my point. I'm being logical here. If my mother and father actually created me, actually gave me anger, psychosis, depression, and jealousy, I mean, that's outrageous. That's completely fascist. But we believe it's the truth. We don't question it. I think it's a shocking idea. I'm not even joking. Everybody blames their parents. And I mean, if they did make you listen to this, if they actually did give you anger, psychosis, love and compassion, the good ones as well, if they did give you the bad ones, if they actually did do that, then this is completely shocking. You are right to blame them. Please hear me logically. Well, Buddha says they didn't, baby. You made yourself. You came into this life completely programmed. So now we can go into details about how the way karma ripens. You know, the way karma ripens. But it's been a whole hour since I've been chatting away. So I think maybe have some questions first. Based upon what I've said so far, I'm now going to begin to go into detail about karma. We've just begun to give the introduction, okay? We'll now go to detail. But are there any questions, please, about what I've said so far? If not, I can keep going. It's just fine.
I had a quick question.
Good, yes.
You mentioned a book really early on tonight about the out-of-body experience. I missed who that was by.
Well, that was just one small chapter. The whole book was about, I'll tell you. Yeah, the whole book was of this American medical journalist called Nick Teresi. And it's called The Undead. And he's an atheist, and it's his own deep, he's a very funny fellow, his own deep research of the American medical system and all the contradictions and obstacles and problems now in the industry of donating organs. So it's a very fascinating book. Nick Teresi.
Thank you.
Called The Undead. He's a wonderful fellow. Okay. But it was interesting, he interviewed lots of religions, but he never interviewed a Tibetan Buddhist. And I think he would have been very delighted because there are very detailed descriptions, you know, in Tibetan Buddhism. Anyway, I kept meaning I'd send him a book, but I never did. Anyway, so he was a wonderful book. Okay, go on, people. Any questions? If not, it's just fine. I'll continue.
Hello.
Yes.
I missed one term that you said. You said there is a more tasty term for sentient being.
Yes,
and
exactly.
You said
the Tibetan
mind of.
No, I'll tell you. It's the Tibetan term sem chen. Sem chen, and it means mind possessor.
Okay.
You got it? It's very tasty. Mind possessor. So an ant is a mind possessor. A monkey is a mind possessor. There are hell beings. There are spirits. There are billions of beings we can't see, not just humans. And so the Buddha is discussing all of these, not just discussing humans. Clear?
Okay.
Good,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Thank you, Anna. Anybody else?
Yes, I have a question. It's Brenda speaking.
Yes, Brenda.
You said earlier that the mantra practices
support
the job.
Oh, mantra. Yeah, sorry.
Mantra
yeah.
practices,
Yeah.
I wrote it, support the job of being a Buddhist.
Yeah.
I struggle with, I guess my question is, can you clarify and help me understand how doing mantras and Tibetan prayers and prostrations support
Good.
the job of being a
Excellent
Buddhist,
practice.
because I struggle with it.
I understand, Brenda, and lots of people do, because we
Good.
just,
I'm glad I'm
just
not alone.
because we think it's because we call it rituals, we call it religion, and when we say
Yeah.
the word religion, we don't think it's serious. That's probably the assumption in our mind. We can't see
Yeah.
the benefit. Okay, let me tell you the Buddhist
Thank you.
analysis of it. Thank you. Brilliant question. Okay, now remember I said before, the fundamental view in Buddhism about karma is that every millisecond of what we think and do and say is part of the process of programming us into the person we become. That's a concept you get? It's a pretty tasty concept, isn't it?
Very tasty
Okay,
concept.
now listen to this, honey. Listen to this. So there you've got the Sanskrit mantra. It's a bunch of words in a foreign language. Om
Yes.
Mani Padme Hum. We all learn it's related to the development of compassion. Okay,
Yeah.
now there's different ways of describing the benefit. So if you buy into the meaning, you just say you decide, you agree, you like the Dalai Lama, you've listened to his teachings, and he talks about Om Mani Padme Hum, and he does Om Mani Padme Hum, and maybe you don't speak Sanskrit, but you know it's the mantra of compassion, and you want to get compassionate, and you're just thinking compassionate as you say Om Mani Padme Hum. Now, how do you think that's going to program you? Is that not a positive programming? Right there.
Yes, it is.
That's the logic. Right, that's one logic. That's one, right there, right there. Now, let's say it's exactly the same as saying, let's say it's in English because you're a New Zealander, and let's say you say, you translate one of the mantras and you say it in English. That you can see the meaning of that too, can't you? Because it's the words
Yes.
you know. So instead of sitting there having a mantra saying, I hate my husband, I hate my husband, I hate my husband. If there were a mantra called I hate my husband, and believe me, honey, we're saying plenty of negative mantras, what do you think you're doing to your own mind? You're programming your mind with anger. So that's the fundamental logic of what we're doing every second. So if there is a thing that happens to be in Sanskrit, but the meaning is compassion, and you decide to buy into that meaning, then of course you're programming your mind with compassion, honey. Is that not logical?
Yes, I understand.
It's very down to earth, isn't it?
So does that same philosophy, if you like, apply to doing, because I'm actually a Buddhist. I belong to the karma Kagyu
Oh,
sect.
wonderful. Yes, great.
Tibetan, and so there's a lot of practices.
Oh, honey, child, you Kargyupas leave everybody for dead. You just completely into all your practices and all your non-dros and everything. So listen, it's the same logic. Listen to me, honey. You'll understand this, Brenda. Now listen. Okay. Let's say, you meet a Tibetan person who's never met a Western person in their life. They come out of the hermitage in the Himalayas, and they come and they meet you, and you being a New Zealander and a friendly person, you stick your hand out, won't you? You'll stick your hand out to shake the hand. He will look at you with puzzlement. This funny looking hand poking at him. He doesn't know what a shake. Listen to this point. He doesn't know what a handshake is. So what is a handshake? It's a ritual that you and I happen to understand. And you know what it means. I know what it means. So we both buy into that meaning, and then it becomes that meaning. But we don't call it a ritual. But what else is a ritual? But everything we do in our cultures. That's everything is that. So we've got to go below the surface, But when you explain it to him, and now he knows what a handshake is, he'll poke his hand out as well. But that's a ritual, baby, and everything we do is rituals. We do certain things with our body, the way we go shopping, the way we eat, all cultures have their own style of doing things physically. To a foreigner, it looks like a ritual, but to you, it's just the way you do things. Well, that's what prostrations are. The meaning of a prostration, you want to become a Buddha, you want to purify your body, speech, and mind. You recognize you've created negative karma with your body, your speech, and your mind. So you do the practice of your body, putting your hand up here, wanting to become like the Buddha. You buy into the meaning. You go down on the ground, you say the words. Honey, you're programming your mind with virtue, you're purifying your pride, you're purifying your delusions. That's the meaning. And the more you give it that meaning, the more it has that meaning. But if you do it as a mere ritual, that is superstition. Exactly.
Thank you very much, Venerable Robina.
Good.
Because our darling Lama doesn't quite understand how we kind of need to understand some of these things, and I leave sometimes feeling not good enough because I'm not doing enough of what he thinks I should be doing. And I know why he wants us to do that.
I know, but you shouldn't.
And he's lovely.
I know, but you shouldn't think you're not doing the right thing. It's important we understand, and that's why, you know, I know when Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, my lamas, you know, when they first met Westerners, Lama Yeshe especially, he went out of his way to put it in ordinary, down-to-earth, hippie 1970s terms. And it's very powerful when you do that. And that's what I try to do because it's so important. I know when I first heard the Dharma, Brenda, I knew it was my path, even though I was struggling, but I knew I had to unpack it and unravel it and see the logic in it. If there's no logic... And we're very intellectually lazy sometimes. We'd rather just swallow it whole. It's not benefit. We've got to rip it to pieces and see if there's logic to it. Then it's very compelling.
I totally agree because it's totally what I do.
Good, darling. Good. Well done. You keep doing
thank you so much.
Thank
you so much.
A pleasure, sweetheart. Good. So the other thing, though, Brenda, one more point. Why the lamas stress these points. It's a bit like this, I'll tell you. Let's say you go to see Roger Federer play tennis and it blows your mind and you want to learn to play tennis. So you rush off and, please, Roger, show me how to play tennis. Let's say, you know, you're 20 kilos overweight and you've got no fitness and you're hopeless and you don't even know how to hold a tennis racket and you can't run properly. Guess what he would answer? He would say, well, honey child, Brenda, I want you to go away for 6 months and lose 20 kilos and get fit and go to nutrition school and learn to jog. And you'll say, no, you didn't hear me, Roger. I want you to teach me to play tennis. Get my point. You're not prepared yet to play tennis. So this is what nondro means, honey child. This is your prostrations, your practicing in relation to the Buddhas, and another whole discussion here. All the practices in relation to the Buddha are intensely more powerful for our mind because of the power of enlightened beings. So, of course, we have to think about that. So all the jogging and the go on the diet, that's your preliminary practices. Then you're ready to get to Federer because your body isn't ready yet. So the same with our mind, Brenda. The Buddha says the delusions are so primordially deep inside us, we can't just leap into all these practices and get single point of concentration and get realizations of emptiness. We've got to do we've got to metaphorically do all our prostration, do our jogging, and that's our prostrations. And all those practices, they function to prime our mind to get the rubbish out of the way so that we're then able to understand and able to get realizations. That's the function. But the lamas don't tell it to us like that. They just assume and it takes us a while to understand it, sweetheart.
Yeah, thank you.
You understand?
Thank you.
Good.
Yes, I do.
So you stick to your lama, okay? He'll lead you in the right direction.
He's lovely.
Good. Okay, sweet. That's a really good point. Thank you, Brenda. So any other questions, you people? Hello, Chuck.
Hello, Venerable Robina. Thank you for your teachings and your generosity. Of course, always enjoyed being with you. Question is, you've talked today about cause and effect, and how does that, are we just not there yet with dependent arising, or is it the same thing? Are you going to mention?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, all the teachings, you must know, Chuck, all the teachings structured in this Lam Rim or whatever the equivalent is in all the different traditions in Tibet, the structuring of Buddha's teachings from the most basic to the most advanced. All the teachings, as we know, lead us finally to emptiness and dependent arising. That's what he's trying to lead us to finally realize the ultimate reality so that we can get out of samsara. Everything leads us to that. So dependent arising, as Lama Yeshe puts it, is the king of logics to prove emptiness. So the way we will discuss this, definitely, it's a good point to discuss, because karma leads us to this. Why? Is because there are different levels at which Buddha taught dependent arising. And this is where he diverged from the Hindus. And there are three main levels. And at each of these, there are particular debates he has with the prevailing views before, which is why he diverged in his own direction. And the very first level of dependent arising that he argues with is the view that there is a permanent uncaused energy called God, or a permanent uncaused energy or entity called self, or soul, or spirit, or the Greeks call it an essence. That's his very first argument with it. So then the presentation of karma, which is, there's no intrinsic little self there that's come from someone else. You are the product of your past causes. So the law of cause and effect in general is a brilliant example of the first level of dependent arising. Then there are more subtle levels that we will discuss later when we talk about emptiness. Are you with me? Good.
Absolutely.
Good.
We're communicating. As you like to say.
Say that again.
As you like to say, we're communicating.
There you go. I'm so happy. Well done. Exactly. We're communicating. Good. Okay, what else? Any more? We can carry on. We'll continue then. I'll continue going into the details. That's it? Okay. Talk to me. Good. Hello, Eleanor. Hello, my dear. Happy to see you.
Hello.
Happy to see you, darling.
Too.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Good.
I just wonder why we use the word saviour of ourselves and others.
I didn't quite hear you, sweetheart. Please repeat it, darling. I didn't hear you, Eleanor.
I wonder why we use the word saviour of ourselves and others when we pray for Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Why do we use the word saviour?
I know it's a very important word in Tibetan, and Lama Zopa loves that word, and we don't like it in the West because we think it sounds like God saving us and doing all the work, you know. Yeah. But I don't think that's a really valid meaning. I don't think that's the only meaning of, I mean, you know, if you could say, if you're a really good friend to somebody and they're in danger of, you know, getting drunk all the time and you become their closest friend and help them and support them, then you save them from danger. I mean, the word save somebody is a wonderful idea. You know, you can save a person from having a car accident. You can save a person from killing themselves. I think it's a marvelous idea. But because we're so used to the Christian word saviour, we can't hear it properly in Buddhist terms. But it's a very logical word. Can you not hear me, Alan? Can you hear that point?
I can hear you.
Yeah, good. I think we have, you see, this is the problem with words. I think it's so powerful, Eleanor. I think this is the problem with words. We grow up with a certain definition, then we hear it in another context, and we put the same definition onto it. That's the problem. That's the big problem. You understand? It's I mean, to save somebody from danger is a most precious thing to do. So we understand it if we break it down like that. But we immediately assume it's the Christian teaching, and it's not the same. Do you understand, darling? Thank you for that, Owen. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, let's go into some more detail now about this principle, the law of karma, that runs the world. I mean, if you think it like that, you know, the law of botany runs all gardens. No one forces it on top of the garden. Botany is the name we give to what goes on in gardens. Well, the law of karma is the name that Buddhism gives to what goes on in minds and lives of sentient beings. It's a natural law. It's totally integrated into our mind. It's not like this stick that we use to beat somebody with this idea of punishment and reward. We've got to learn to hear it differently. Okay, so the next level of, as I mentioned, the next level of detail of this law of cause and effect that says that whatever we think and do and say programs us, and I think Buddha would have liked that concept, sows seeds in our mind that will necessarily produce our future. That's hear that point. It's very simple. It's a shocking concept. There's nothing like that in our neuroscientific view, even though there is. Okay, let me explain. You know perfectly well, if you start to learn music, who do you think produces the musician you become? We don't use those words, but you know perfectly well it's you who does it. You don't, if they see you playing piano, oh, why are you good at piano, Robina? Oh, it's my teacher's fault. It's Mozart's fault. It's Mr. Steinway's fault for playing for making a good piano. You know you are the cause of why you are a good musician. That's the exact same view that Buddhism has about happiness and suffering. But we've got these very different rules. We know we create the musician. We know we create the carpenter, and it's dependent upon your hard work. You turn yourself into a carpenter. You turn yourself into a musician. But we never think that it's we who turn ourselves into a happy or suffering person. We think it's everybody else who does it. That's why we're so demented, you know. But it's the same principle. We get it. We just don't think it through like this. We know, if you're studying music, that every millisecond of what you think and do and say in relation to music is what produces the musician. It's not a concept we don't understand. It's just that we don't apply it to happiness and suffering. Think about that. It's quite interesting. So the next level of detail, as I said, is that every millisecond of what you think and do and say that we label negative will necessarily ripen as suffering. And every millisecond of what we think and do and say that's called positive will ripen as our happiness. So they're the broad statements, but it's extremely nuanced to unpack those words, the levels of happiness, the levels of suffering, the levels of negative, the levels of positive, obviously. But you've got to start with the principles, you know. So there are 4 ways that our present actions will ripen in the future. 4 ways that our present experiences are the fruit of our past actions. It's such a simple principle, you know. So let's look at these 4 ways, and let's look at any particular action, let's say a virtuous action of conscious, intentional not killing. That's a very conscious action. Merely sitting here like we are now, merely not killing. There's no karma of not killing happening because your mind has to be involved. And I'm going to go into this. This is a crucial point to understand. So an action that's called not killing has to, for it to be what they call a complete action, there have to be 4 things in place when you do it. The first is, there's got to be an object of the action. In this case, of course, it will be a living being. Let's say the mouse in your kitchen. Object, the first one, the mouse. Second is your mind involved in it. And this is the hugest, most important piece. And there's 2 parts there. There's more detail to all of this, but I'm kind of keeping it simple. So there's 2 parts to number 2. 2A is there has to be intention, not the meaning we give it of good intention. That's motivation. That's 2B. And there's a separate, but they're like they're together. They all happen so quickly. So the intention, this is the word intention or volition is absolutely huge in the Buddhist understanding of the mind. It's what runs the show. If you want a boss inside you, it's your intention. Intention is every millisecond that's in our mind. But our trouble is we come into this life so programmed with our tendencies that we don't even notice 90% of the time that there's intention every second. Intention means I will. Intention is volition. I will. This is the major one. There has to be, the second part is 2A, intention. I will not kill the mouse. Something like that. It'll be very intentional. The next bit, 2B, in this number 2, but this is now motivation. And normally speaking, let's say Chuck has a mouse in his kitchen and he's a compassionate guy. He sees the mouse, oh, I must not kill it. And why? It's packed so totally in there that as if it comes at the same time. But they're 2 separate thoughts. This is quite important to understand. There's intention, I will not kill the mouse. Why not, Chuck? Well, the poor mouse is suffering. Look at it. I don't want to hurt the mouse. He's got compassion. But they so totally come together so quickly. Now look at my example, let's say, and I hate mice. So I think they're disgusting. So exactly the same for me if it's an action of called killing. The first has to be an object, the mouse. The next one is intention. I will kill the mouse. Motivation, disgusting mouse. But they come so completely together, it's as if it's one thought. But there are 2 thoughts there. And of those 2, if there is no intention, there's no action at all. There's no karma. You could argue that. But if the key one, though, once there is intention, the key one is motivation. In general, the Buddhist view is that what motivates us to do an action is what determines whether it becomes a negative or positive action. And I think you can prove it pretty quickly. Let's think of a simple action called generosity. Let's say, again, I haven't finished. Okay, we'll finish the killing and the non-killing. The 4 things in place. In Chuck's example, first is the object, a mouse, a living mouse. Second, his mind involved. 2A, I must not kill the mouse. 2B, why not? Compassion. That's it. That's the mind involved. 3, he does the action, gets the mouse. And 4, happy mouse. Goodbye, thank you, Chuck. Complete. That's a complete action of non-killing, roughly speaking. Now, in my case, 1, the object. 2A, intention, I will kill the mouse. Why? Disgust, aversion, yuck. 3, I do the action. 4, result, dead mouse. Speaking simply. Now let's see the example. You'll prove you can see it when we look at a simple example like a good action, like say generosity. One is the object, a homeless person. And Chuck sees the homeless person. 2, intention, I will give $10. Motivation, generosity, compassion. But they come quickly together, you know. 3, he does the action. 4, the person gets the $10. That's a complete action of generosity. Now, let's say Chuck is my boyfriend and he's rich. And I want him to like me because I want his money, you know. So I act all lovey-dovey and nice to him. And he can't find his wallet because he's got to get a taxi. And he needs his, I'll give you $20, Chuck. I'll let you know, don't pay me back. I'll give you $20. And he thinks how kind Robina is. Now listen to this. My action. 1, object called Chuck. 2, intention. I will give $20. Motivation. My motivation stinks. It's completely attachment. It's manipulative. It is not virtuous at all. So that's, you can argue he gets his $20, he's happy. But you cannot argue I create much virtuous karma because my motivation was manipulative. My motivation was attachment. You can even argue the other way. Let's say Chuck, like a lot of Western people think, I don't know, I'm sure he doesn't, but I'm just saying it. Let's say we typically think it's okay to kill your pussycat. We call it euthanasia, don't we, with humans? This is a really powerful question. We could talk about this a lot, but let's go into it briefly. Give the example. So let's say Chuck's one of those people who thinks it's okay to kill your pussycat or your doggy-woggy because they're sick. And this is the point. This is the powerful point now. 1 is the object, pussycat. 2, intention. I will kill my pussycat. Okay, so we don't say it that way. We're very polite. We call it putting her down. Putting her to sleep, we'll say. But it's called killing, basically. Intention, I will kill my pussycat. Motivation, compassion. There's no doubt he has compassion. He sees his pussycat. His pussycat's suffering terribly. All he wants is his pussycat to stop suffering. That's called compassion. But as His Holiness says, compassion not enough. You need wisdom. So wisdom in this case is wisdom we do not have. The wisdom that you need, so there's 2 things, okay, 2 things here. 1 is the object, pussycat. 2, intention, I will kill my pussycat. Motivation, compassion, because Chuck believes that when this pussycat dies, the suffering will stop. Let's say he has no view of reincarnation, and that's the materialist view, and that's a typical view. So you're right if that's the case. You are very kind. In fact, if I get cancer, please kill me too. But as we know, the Buddha asserts that your consciousness continues. And not only that it's a very specific process, and that the way your mind is at the time you begin to die, this is the crucial thing, that if your mind is negative and freaked out and in pain and suffering, with ignorance, like a pussycat's mind pretty much would be, then if your mind is freaking out at the time you die, it's quite technical, that will trigger a negative karmic seed of the pussycat, which will then throw the pussycat into a much worse suffering rebirth. So actually, you can't say for certain that you're not throwing the pussycat from the frying pan into the fire, because you don't have the certainty. It's like playing Russian roulette with your pussycat. So the point is, though, his motivation of compassion means that he didn't create much negative karma. But do not think that you helped your pussycat. The same with me with the generous, with Chuck. I'll give him $20. He gets his $20. He's happy. But what about my karma? No good karma at all. I was being manipulative and mean. So motivation is everything, you know. That's the key characteristic that determines whether what we do is negative or positive. Pretty powerful concept, and it's kind of reasonable. We understand it. So meaning well is not enough, in other words. Got to have wisdom, and we don't have that wisdom. So you don't just, therefore there's lots of ways you can help your pussycat die peacefully. Listen to mantras. Let it hear the mantras. Be kind to it. Let it be peaceful. And when its mind is peaceful, and if it dies peacefully, then it enables one of its virtuous karmic seeds to be triggered, which means it'll get a human body, etc., etc., So you help your pussycat. You can't guarantee, but, to play Russian roulette with our minds. But the point I'm making is this. 1, Chuck creates good. You could say he creates virtuous karma, but don't think he helped the pussycat. And that's why he did it in the first place, isn't it? We should ask, It's very interesting. So the key factor is the mind involved in an action. So you could argue, let's say Chuck is in the kitchen and there's a mouse there and he stands on the mouse. So he doesn't even know. He doesn't even know there's a mouse there. There's no thought of mouse, no thought of anger, no thought of compassion. He's cooking dinner, you know. You'd have to argue, how can you say there's karma? Karma is a function of the mind. Okay, it's then carried out, the wishes of the mind are carried out by the servants of the mind, which are the speech and the body. But the body on its own can't create karma, you know. You could argue. So the mind involved in what we do. And the thing is, our mind is involved, but we don't even notice because we're so programmed, you know. This is a tragedy. This is why we have to become conscious. So it's obvious, isn't it? If every millisecond of what you think and do and say is either negative or positive, speaking simply, and the negative will ripen as your suffering, and the positive will ripen as your happiness, it kind of goes without saying. If everything you eat, the same logic, if everything you eat produces the body that becomes yours, and the rubbish stuff produces a sick body, and the good stuff produces a healthy body, again, we get it when it comes to things like this. But we have a panic attack when we talk like this about the mind, because we hear it as punishment and reward, you know. It's very, very bizarre, actually. But when we get it, I mean, I know when I first heard the teachings from the Lamas, when I first heard in Australia, I mean, I'd been a Catholic, but also I'd given that up. I'd an old radical lefty and a hippie and all those things. I remember the karmic that blew my mind, the view of karma. It's the thing that really struck me. I felt it was the thing that I'd missed in my life, you know. And for me as a practitioner, trying to be a practitioner like everybody else, that plays the most powerful role. In other words, if we don't understand karma, we don't understand Buddhist practice properly, you know. It's really true. So, okay. Then our actions ripen in 4 ways. And if we can even understand this, just even intellectually, it gives us a really like a map for understanding how to interpret our life. And therefore, a map to follow for how to live our life. I mean, if you don't learn botany, how the hell can you get a garden? It's not enough to say you believe in botany. It's completely useless to say you believe in botany. But that's what we think of religion. Oh, I believe in karma. I don't care you believe in it. What good is that? It's like just ridiculous. You can believe in botany. It works. But what if you don't know botany? You can't get a garden. Same with karma, you know. Okay, there are 4 ways in which our present, and now let's look at our past actions, are ripening in our present life. The first is our human body. So this is for the Buddha to get a human body as opposed to a dog body or an ant body or a hell body or another kind of body. There's all kinds of beings in the world, the universe, all of whom are experiencing the fruits of their own actions. We're all the creators of ourselves. That's the tragedy. We don't realize it. So the first result that we are already experiencing is we've got a human life. Well, for the Buddha, you can almost argue it's like winning the lottery. It's not winning the lottery because it's not good luck and bad luck. It's the fruit of strong, intentional living in vows, in fact. The vows give so much power. We're going to talk about this. Living in vows is the most potent, delicious way to create very powerful, strong, intentional, lots and lots of karmic seeds to put in your main karmic bank vault of non-killing. At the time of death, we need one of those virtuous karmic seeds to be triggered, and that's what happened with us. We can deduce that's what happened with us. At our past life, before we stop breathing, it's all very precisely dealt with, detailed in the texts. One of our virtuous karmic seeds from a past life of living in vows of morality, Lama Zopa says, just being good is not enough. He says the karma we must have created to get this human body, just the body, plus to have the conditions in which we want to practice and practice virtue, it has to have been created in the framework of our living in vows of morality in the past. We're going to go into the power of vows. So one of those virtuous karmic seeds of our past non-killing is the cause, was triggered before we even stopped breathing, was triggered, that then programmed us to go to our particular mother's human womb a few weeks later when she hopped into bed with our daddy, you know. We created that. It's like a miracle. It's sort of like having $10 million in the bank. I'm not trying to be crass. Because we know the meaning of money. We know that that's a phenomenal amount of work. Let's say you worked hard to earn $10 million. You think about this, a simple logic. You would never want to waste a single dollar. Every time you looked at that number in the bank, you'd delight and think, not just, oh, aren't I lucky? I've got $10 million. You'd never forget the work you did to earn it. That's the way to think about getting a human body, like a miracle. That we worked so hard at virtue and goodness and non-killing and non-harming that we've got a reasonable human body. This is like a miracle already. We should be so blissed out. But of course we just take it for granted because we think it came from mummy. We created it. Not to have a... So that's just the first one. We got the human body. The first way our karma ripened is we've got the human body. Now the second way, the second track of karma, if you like, is the kind of mind you have got in that human body. Look at Mother Teresa and look at Hitler. Two classic extreme examples. And this is called the second karma, this one, is called the tendencies, similar to the cause. So we look into Mother Teresa's mind, we can deduce, and from her behavior, that she had virtue and kindness and compassion and blah, blah, blah. You can tell by what she did. We can also tell what Hitler had in his mind by what he did. It's pretty evident. You know, intense ego grasping, intense attachment, intense anger, intense pride, intense really extreme wrong views, deluded mind. That's called intentions or tendencies, similar to the cause. This is the one that really takes us time, because in our world we absolutely believe that our mummy and daddy gave us these tendencies. We look in our genes, our brain, and we can't find the evidence of them all, but that's what we believe. So we're puzzled. Why Hitler? 27 books trying to work out why Hitler, you know. Well, Buddha's view is very simple. He came into this world programmed with his own tendencies and a strong karmic connection with all the people he affected. This is the third kind of karma. The third way, look into your life now. First of all, you've got the human body. Second, you've got a mind, your own tendencies. You wish to not kill or lie or steal, or the wish to be lazy or depressed, or not wish, just the tendency. We're programmed, you know. The third one is called experiences, similar to the cause. Now look at your life from the second you were born up until now. Think about it. You can divide all your experiences in relation to sentient beings you have come across, the mummy, the daddy, the siblings, the auntie, the uncle, the kids at school, the rats, the cockroaches, you know, the animals you meet, all these sentient beings who've impacted upon you since you were born. Think about it. You can divide them into two categories. Those that have been nice to you and those that have been mean to you. And sometimes they change roles, don't they? Think about it. It's not complicated. So these are all called experiences that you experience at the hands of others, isn't it? People are kind to you, people are mean to you, the bank gives you credit, another bank won't give you credit, the boyfriend cheats on you, people love you, people think you're beautiful. I mean, look at our experiences. We're very social beings, all in relation to how we're seen and treated by others. This is the third track of karma, and it's called experiences similar to the cause. The fourth way our karma ripens is we have environments. We don't walk in the sky, we have an environment. But even the way the physical environment impacts upon us. So of course this sounds pretty esoteric. How, for example, you know, past actions can cause the environment to impact upon you a certain way, but it's completely explained logically in the Vajrayana. Totally. When you understand the Vajrayana model, it makes complete sense. So let's use one example of non-killing. The first result of non-killing, as it ripens as a type of rebirth, you'll get a human body. If you've got a tendency not to kill, but look at the human world, most humans actually do the opposite. This is a total tragedy. You might get a human body, but you wake up with a tendency to kill. Just because you got the result of non-killing with one way doesn't mean you don't get the other one of the opposite. So look at most humans, they kill something. This is the greatest tragedy of all. I'll explain. But let's say you wake up in this life with no thought to kill, or when you start to hear about it, you decide you don't want to kill, like if we become Buddhists. That's incredible to have. It's such an unusual one. Most humans kill something. Most religions say it's okay to kill some beings. I was taught as a Catholic that God made animals without a soul solely for our benefit. It's not the Buddha's view at all. The third one, as I said, is, in terms of not killing, first you get a human body. If that one ripens, we all got one of those. Second, you might have a tendency not to kill. Third, the experience similar to the cause of past non-killing, the particular track of karma called experiences, is, guess what? You don't get killed. You don't die young. Well, so far so good for us, isn't it? But look in the world. Look at the little children who die young. 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Millions of people die young. Millions of people get killed. So that's the karmic result of their past killing. We don't get killed because that's the karmic result of our non-killing. Everything any being ever experiences, without exception, the first cause is always their own past action. Buddha says we create ourselves, basically. The fourth way our karma ripens in terms of not killing is that the food and the water and the air will nourish you. You'll have a healthy body, you won't get sick much, you'll have good health and well-being, and you can eat whatever you like, Now look at the opposite. So look at the opposite. Even as humans, we've got the human body, but look at the tendency to kill. Look at the world, the tragedy. Killing billions of animals and creatures and bugs, and we all mostly kill. It's so tragic. We've got the tendency to kill. Third one, look at the people who die young. Even if you start to do market research, you did a survey, we never do this. Think about this. From the time of conception, in a human mummy's womb, you're called a human being. But if you did the numbers, I think you're going to find that millions and millions of people who got a human body, who ran like a magnet and jumped into a mummy's human womb, but they didn't even get out of the womb. They got killed, aborted, or miscarriage. There must be millions. So they got the karma to be born human. They won the lottery, the first karma, but they got the third one of killing. So they die young, they get aborted or miscarry, or you die when you're 1, or you die when you're 2. Everything is the fruit of past actions. It's not punishment, it's not reward, it's not punitive, it's not moralistic, it's a natural law. That's the Buddha's view. So they're the principles, basic principles. So if you look in your life, you might see that you get sick all the time, and the food is always, you might have allergies, and the air is always polluted. This is the fruit of your past killing. Every second is the fruit of your past killing. So when you know that, you don't beat yourself up, I'm a bad person. No, you go, wow, now I know why it's happening. Let me purify it. Don't do it again. So clear. If, let's say, people are always not believing your words, and you're telling the truth, this is so painful. Everybody has this. Why don't you believe me? I'm speaking the truth. It's because of your past lying. And karma's personal as to those people. They don't believe your words. I think this is the major way we suffer in our lives. There's this third kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause. When all the bad things happen to us. You're a nice person, people harm you. We always ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? This is the exact explanation, I remember I was at a conference in Miami, and there was a Jew, a rabbi, a Catholic, and a Lutheran. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But it was true. And the topic of the little seminar we had was, why do bad things happen to good people? Which blows everybody's mind, because this is the interesting point. We have an assumption. Let's say you're born in this life with good tendencies. You are kind, you are loving, you are generous, you don't lie, you don't steal. This is really common experience. But bad things happen to you. This is why we go mad, isn't it? We don't know why. I'm a nice person. Why is this happening to me? This is the main way we suffer, I would say. Think about it. Think about it. I remember at this conference, I gave, I didn't understand the Catholic and the Lutheran, but I gave my talk about karma, and the rabbi clapped. He said, we believe the same thing. He was a Kabbalah rabbi. He said they have the view of karma. And he says, we have a saying. Every time something bad happens, we go, great, one less debt to repay, It was very interesting. So this is really powerful for helping us understand why things happen. Because you think about your life, why most people suffer so terribly is, why is this happening to me? And then when you look in the world and you see innocent babies and children and innocent people and animals get harmed, people go mad. Why is it happening? And I think it's very powerful that we ask the question why. We ask why. We go crazy asking why. Well, all I'm giving here is Buddha's answer. You don't have to believe Buddha. I'm not asking you to believe Buddha. I'm just telling you his answer. It's very interesting. Any more questions before we finish? Don't have to be. Just
you said the fourth one is the environment, like
yes,
similar to the cause?
Karma, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Environmental karma. And I'll go into more detail next talk. Okay, David? Well, good. Thank
Venerable,
you, Jenna. Yes, please talk.
Venerable Robina, thanks
yes.
for your wonderful teachings.
Good,
I just want to ask you,
yeah.
You say the environment can affect you karmatically.
Yeah.
Does that extend to a child in the womb, from how the mother is treating herself? Does that have a knock-on effect to the unborn child?
We'll put it this way. Let's put it this way, Terry. Yeah. Let's say that child, as the Buddhist you would be, of course, that child, had a previous life, and when that person died, and then their mother hopped into bed with a boyfriend or a husband, and then the karma ripened, and you ran like a magnet into that womb. And let's say this is the point now. Let's say that little child, that fetus, has really good karma, very good non-killing karma. They're going to be a fat and healthy little baby, and whatever they eat will nourish them. So that means even if their mummy is a junkie, or even if she eats bad food, because the child's karma is so virtuous, it won't be so affected. But put it the other way, let's say that child has killing karma that's going to ripen as environmental, and they're going to get diseases and sick, then of course the mother's behavior will affect. In general, everybody's behavior does affect us, but our resilience or lack of it, that's due to our past karma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
That makes sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
thank
good.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, dearest people, time to go. Went so quickly, didn't it?
It did.
Okay, sweethearts, thank you, Jennifer. So kind, everybody. So happy to see you all. And before you know it, we'll be back again to each other, and we'll continue this discussion about karma. Thank you, darlings. Dangchub, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchi, Ke Panyampa, Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gondu Pelba Shog. 2 little dedication prayers. Again, this is Brenda's point. What's the point of saying prayers? Well, these are thoughts, Brenda, and these are marvelous positive thoughts. So let's say them in English. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta, which is this amazing aspiration to never give up helping others, not yet born in the minds of others, may it arise, and may that has arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Wishes. Brenda, there's a lovely saying in Tibetan, everything exists on the tip of the wish. Every thought counts. So we're programming our mind just for our benefit. By saying these words, we are programming our mind with these marvelous thoughts. And then because we're programming our mind, we'll have benefit to others as well, because we'll help others. This is the same type of prayer, but it's the realization of emptiness, which we're going to talk about. So may the precious view of realizing the ultimate nature of reality, not yet born in minds of others, may it arise, and that which has arisen, may it not decline. May it not decline, but increase more and more. Okay, so we'll just say the words. The other one is a dedication prayer that's saying, I'm saying it this way, here we've been 90 minutes, 100 minutes, whatever, all the thoughts we've had, everyone is sowing a seed in the mind. So may we nourish these seeds from this moment forward with our effort and our practice, so that we do nourish these seeds, so that they do grow in the future in the development of our amazing potential, so we can be a benefit to sentient beings. And may all our holy lamas, Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa, all your holy lamas, Brenda's wonderful, kind lama, all of them live long, long lives. The world needs them badly, That's all. Okay, precious ones. Thank you so much. Much love.